Secrecy is now the standard operating procedure in the Trump administration. The White House visitors logs, the president's tax returns kept under lock and key. The White House press briefings have grown less frequent and less televised. As the New York Times noted, during June, the White House has held an average of one televised briefing per week, down from several each week in previous months. But when reporters complain, the administration stonewalls.
Tell us why you turned the cameras off. Why are they off, Sean?
It is a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question. You are a taxpayer-funded spokesman for the United States government. Can you at least give us an explanation as to why the cameras are off?
Can we get this out of the way? Can we address the cameras issue? Do you think this will
Yeah, some days we'll have them, some days we won't. The president's going to speak today in the Rose Garden. I want the president's voice to carry the day. And I think, look, this is nothing inconsistent with what we've said since day one.
All right, still with me, Joy Reid, Nicholas Confessori, Jason Johnson, Michelle Goldberg, and we have Michael Isikoff and Michael Schmidt. And Jason, so there's two things happening as we were talking about, right? So the official channels have gotten squeezed in all kinds of ways. State Department, for instance, which is a huge deal for the rest of the world, daily briefing where the Indonesian press and the Saudi press and everyone else could ask them questions that would go out to the world is very important. That's basically been kind of put on the shelf. Those briefings, all these official modes of communication squeezed. It's all back channel stuff. And then that back channel stuff is much easier to booby trap or weaponize and lead people intentionally in a false direction.
Right. We used to think the worst situation was a sort of like House of Cards, Remy Danton, I'll take a drink when you're right. You know, you sort of figure it's like, okay, it's going to be hard to get information, but the information is legitimate. When you have different factions in the White House who are trying to make you look bad, reporters have to worry about being weaponized against who they work for.
That's right.
It's like, I'm going to use you to take down the New York Times. I'm going to use you to take down CNN. This is not just a verbal war against the press. It is an actual intellectual war against the press by this administration.
Yeah, but Michael Schmidt, you as an investigative reporter, do you feel like you have found yourself amidst booby traps, essentially?
I don't think it's that much. I'm not covering the White House itself on a day-to-day basis. We're trying to get at the story of the Mueller investigation and what Mueller has found and what are their connections between Trump associates and Russia. And that's a, sort of an old school, classified information that we're going at as hard as we can. But to your point, the one thing on the other side of the argument is that the president has done a lot of interviews. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it'd be my guess that he's probably done more interviews in the first, several months of his time in office than any other president. And that's been interesting because you get to see, as obviously, as you pointed out through the tweets, sort of an unvarnished, the president's thoughts out there on a repeated basis, and that's been interesting.
That is true, although there's been a little bit of a change, right? So the president has traditionally been extremely accessible. During the campaign, he was probably the most accessible candidate who ever campaigned in the modern era. Absolutely. There's no question about that, calling into show after show. He's only given one press conference, full press conference. He's done these sort of 2 and 2s with foreign leaders. And Michael Isikoff, he has given interviews, but since that Lester Holt interview, which he basically admitted the reason that he fired James Comey, it's really only been Fox that he's been giving interviews to. There has been a real change, I would say, in the last bit of time about the accessibility of the president himself.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, a lot of these interviews are Fox interviews where he doesn't get challenged, where he doesn't get pushback. The fact that there's been only one press conference and not for a while means that opportunities to ask him really tough, important questions, we haven't had. And I should also just point out that some of the rhetoric here is pretty disturbing. I remember being at the CPAC conference back in February where he was using the enemy of the people line, which, is a line that has historical resonance and is, to demonize the press as the enemy of the people is something that is rhetoric I don't think we've seen before and is noteworthy.
What do you think about that, Michael Schmidt?
Well, he has demonized the press, but it's interesting how much time he spends obsessing about the press.
This is the central paradox, is that there was a great, someone tweeted this the other day, someone noted this, that he had went out and gave a speech where he talked about how terrible the press was. I think it was in Iowa. He was doing one of those campaign rallies, and then went back and talked off the record to the pool for 30 minutes, which is sort of Donald Trump's relationship to the media in a nutshell, Michael.
So is he using the press as a diversion to demonize the press, and then he's obsessing about the press? It seems like he spends so much of his morning and maybe the rest of his day, looking at the morning shows, tweeting about them, criticizing our coverage, demonizing us. It's just interesting how much time and energy he has focused on this one issue. And if you talk to White House officials, they'll tell you it's because of the Russia stuff. They see the Russia stuff as a cloud, and he's trying to push back on that. But at the same time, his criticisms of the media go far beyond that.
Well, and he is also, I mean, as a sort of matter of a biographical matter, about the man, he has been obsessed with the press and press coverage from the moment that he first started appearing on the tabloids.
And remember, you hate the thing you love. If you think about what Donald Trump has truly actually been successful at in his life, it hasn't really been real estate. It hasn't been casinos. It's been working the New York media. The New York tabloid press was the thing he was good at, getting them to write about Donald Trump, getting them to write about who Donald Trump is dating, planting stories, even using a fake name and pretending to be his own publicist to get them to talk about Donald Trump, look at Donald Trump, marvel at Donald Trump. His one success has been self-promotion. Now he finds himself in a position where he cannot cause the press to praise him or talk about him or shine him in a glowing light, and he is clearly incredibly frustrated by it.
His biographer once reported that he had saved the clipping from the first time he made the papers. It was actually when he was a kid. He'd been quoted in a paper, and he saved it. And he remembered that moment and the power of that moment. And as Joy says, he finds that his usual relationship has been short-circuited, and I think he craves validation from the press. He has all his life, and he's not getting it.
And that's one of the reasons why it leads to the leaks he's complaining about. Because we've seen report after report of people in the White House saying, look, he won't listen to us, so we got to leak it because he'll pay attention.
Michael Isikoff and Michael Schmidt, thank you both for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.